Addicts. Tactics.
You know vampires. Creatures of the night. Immortal predators drinking blood to survive. Seductive monsters hunting innocent victims. Hollywood's eternal bad boy with fangs and charm. That's not what vampires are. That's what we turned them into. What we needed them to be. What we made safe enough to desire. But before Hollywood sanitized them, before they sparkled in sunlight, before they became romantic anti-heroes, there was Nosferatu, Count Orlok, the 1922 Vision, F.W. Murnau's unauthorized adaptation of Dracula, the film that captured what vampire myths actually represent, what we've spent a century trying to forget. Nosferatu isn't about a vampire drinking blood. It's about death as a seductive entity, death as something you invite, death as lover, death as the thing you open your window to, death as the ultimate surrender. And Ellen Hutter doesn't defeat Count Orlok. That's the sanitized reading, the comfortable interpretation, the version that lets you sleep. She surrenders to him, opens her window, offers her neck willingly, invites death into her bedroom, and dies embracing him. This isn't about Van Helsing driving stakes through hearts. It isn't about garlic and crosses protecting the innocent. It isn't about good defeating evil. It's about Thanatos, the death drive, the part of the human psyche that seeks annihilation, that opens the window for poison, that invites destruction while calling it love, that knows something will destroy us and lets it in anyway. We do this every day, in every way. We see death approaching, recognize the danger, understand the cost, and we open the window, offer our necks, surrender to what we know will consume us. Addiction, toxic relationships, digital dopamine, self-destruction packaged as pleasure, annihilation wrapped in seduction, death wearing desire's face. We keep inviting it in, calling it life, calling it love, calling it living, while death drinks. Today we're going to examine why Nosferatu is the truest vampire film ever made. Why Count Orlok represents death itself, not just a bloodsucker. Why Ellen's sacrifice is surrender, not heroism. Why every vampire myth is about our relationship with mortality. Why we romanticize creatures that represent annihilation. And why we're all standing at the window right now, about to invite something in that we know will destroy us. This is the horror of Nosferatu. And you've already opened the window. Let's start with what F.W. Murnau created in 1922, not the story. The vision, the aesthetic, the expressionist nightmare that captured something true about death that we've spent a century trying to unsee. Nosferatu isn't a horror film in the modern sense, it's a fever dream, an expressionist painting in motion, a visual poem about death as disease, as plague, as the uninvited guest that's actually been invited all along. The film uses German expressionism, distorted sets, unnatural angles, shadows that don't match light sources, architecture that shouldn't exist, a visual language that tells you, this isn't reality. This is the nightmare underneath reality. This is what death looks like when it visits. Count Orlok isn't handsome, isn't seductive in the traditional sense, isn't the romantic vampire we've been trained to expect. He's a plague rat standing upright, bald, rat-like features, long fingers like spider legs, moves like something that shouldn't be moving, looks like a corpse animated by something that was never alive. This is what death looks like, not attractive, not romantic, not the thing you consciously choose, but the thing that comes anyway. That moves through walls, that travels in ships full of dead sailors, that spreads like disease. The imagery is plague, the Black Death visualized. Orlok arrives in a ship. The crew dies one by one. The ship reaches port unmanned, death piloting itself, bringing itself to your door. And then the coffins. Orlok travels in a coffin, sleeps in a coffin, brings coffins filled with his native soil, death carrying its own containers, its own transportation, its own home. The coffins arrive in the town, get delivered. placed in houses. Death moving itself into position, setting up shop, preparing to spread. And as Orlok moves through the town, plague follows. People start dying. Not from bite marks, from disease, from fever, from wasting. The town empties, death spreading through contact, through proximity, through the simple fact of its presence. This isn't vampire as predator. This is vampire as pestilence, as epidemic, as the thing that comes to communities and hollows them out. That takes the young and the old. That leaves empty streets and closed shops and houses full of the recently departed. Murnau understood something. Vampire myths aren't about individual predators hunting individual victims. They're about death as contagion. Death as the thing that spreads, that moves from person to person, that hollows out communities, that turns the living into carriers of their own demise. And the visual language reinforces this. The shadows, the distorted architecture, the unnatural movement. This isn't a world operating by normal rules. This is a world where death has entered, where the normal laws don't apply, where things move wrong because death moves wrong. The German expressionism wasn't just aesthetic choice, it was philosophical statement. Death isn't part of normal reality. It's the thing that breaks reality, that distorts it, that makes shadows fall wrong and buildings lean at impossible angles and time move at speeds it shouldn't. When death enters, reality warps. That's what the visual language tells you. That's what every distorted angle and impossible shadow means. Death is here, and nothing works right anymore. This is the vision that Robert Eggers is reviving in 2024. The understanding that vampire films should look like nightmares, should feel like fever dreams, should use visual language that tells you this isn't about a predator. This is about death itself. Now let's talk about Count Orlok, not as vampire, as death personified, as the Reaper wearing flesh, as mortality given form and permission to visit. Orlok doesn't hunt, that's crucial. That's the detail that separates him from every vampire that came after. He doesn't stalk victims in the night, doesn't seduce them, doesn't chase them through streets. He's invited, always invited, every step of the way, every threshold he crosses. He has permission, he has welcome, he has invitation. Thomas Hutter travels to Orlok's castle, voluntarily, to conduct business, to sell him property, to facilitate Orlok's move to town. Thomas invites Death to relocate, helps Death pack, provides Death with transportation and real estate. This is how Death enters, not by force, by invitation, by business transaction, by someone saying, yes, please come to my town, here's a house for you, let me help you move your coffins. We invite our own destruction, facilitate it, provide it with resources, help it establish itself, all while telling ourselves this is just business. Just transaction, just doing our jobs. Thomas doesn't see the danger until it's too late, sees the warning signs, the abandoned castle, the strange behavior, the locked doors, the sense that something isn't right. But he stays, continues the transaction, completes the business. Because turning back would mean acknowledging he's made a mistake, admitting he's facilitated something terrible, accepting he's just invited death to his hometown. So he ignores the warnings, completes the deal, leaves thinking he's escaped, not understanding he's already been bitten, already infected, already carrying death home with him. And Orlok follows, in those coffins, in that ship, moving himself into the house Thomas sold him. The house in Thomas's neighborhood, next door to Thomas's life. Death taking up residence in the community because someone sold it property. This is the mechanism. This is how death enters, not by breaking down doors, by being invited through them, by someone facilitating its entrance while telling themselves this is normal, this is acceptable, this is just how things work. Orlok moves through the town the same way. Every threshold he crosses, he's been invited across, maybe not explicitly, but through the social structures that allow him to purchase property, that recognize his ownership, that grant him the legal right to occupy space. Death doesn't need to force entry. We've built systems that give it permission, that recognize its right to be here, that provide it with legal standing and property rights and the ability to move freely once someone completes the initial transaction. And once established, Orlok spreads. Not by hunting, by proximity, by presence, by the simple fact of being among the living. People die around him, from disease, from wasting, from the drain of having death living next door. He doesn't chase victims. They come to him, drawn by curiosity, by the mystery of the strange new resident, by the gravitational pull that death exerts on the living. We move toward it, circle it, get closer than we should, drawn by something we can't name but can't resist. This is death as entity, not predator. Death as force, not monster. Death as the thing that exists and we orbit, that we invite and then can't escape, that we give permission to enter and then wonder why it won't leave. Orlok is patient, doesn't rush, doesn't chase, just exists. And people die, communities empty, life drains away, not through violence, through proximity to death, through having opened the window and let it in. This is what vampires represent in the original myths. Not predators, not monsters, death itself. The thing we know is coming, the thing we somehow invite, the thing we give permission to enter, the thing we can't escape once we've let it pass the threshold. Now let's examine Ellen, the character everyone misunderstands, the sacrifice that isn't sacrifice, the defeat that's actually surrender, the heroism that's actually capitulation. Ellen Hutter is Thomas's wife, young, beautiful by the standards of the era, devoted to her husband. Everything a proper 1922 wife should be. That's the surface reading. But Ellen is connected to Orlok before Thomas ever travels to the castle. She feels him, dreams of him, senses his approach before anyone knows he's coming. She has a bond with death that predates her husband's business transaction. While Thomas is at the castle, Ellen sleepwalks, moves to the window, opens it, stands there in her nightgown calling for something, saying a name that isn't her husband's, inviting something in that hasn't arrived yet, preparing for death's visit before death has booked passage. This is the crucial detail. Ellen isn't victim, she's willing participant. She's the one who wants Orlok to come, who calls for him, who opens windows, who stands ready to receive him. When Orlok arrives in town, Ellen knows, feels his presence, understands what's happening while everyone else is confused about the plague. She's connected to death in a way the others aren't. She recognizes it, acknowledges it, doesn't pretend it's something else. And as the plague spreads, as people die, as the town empties, Ellen reads, studies, learns, discovers what the book says. That a vampire can be destroyed if a pure woman offers her neck willingly and keeps him past dawn. This is presented as sacrifice, heroism, Ellen giving herself to save the town, the virgin sacrifice that defeats the monster, the good conquering evil through noble death. That's not what happens. Ellen doesn't sacrifice herself. She surrenders. She's been waiting for this, preparing for this, calling for this, since before Orlok arrived. The book just gives her permission to do what she's wanted all along. She opens her window, deliberately, knowing what it means, understanding what will come through. She invites Orlok into her bedroom, her most intimate space, the place where she sleeps, where she's vulnerable, where she's alone. And when he comes, she doesn't fight, doesn't struggle, doesn't try to escape. She offers her neck, willingly, keeps him there, holds him, embraces death, surrenders to what she's been calling for since the film began. The sun rises, Orlok dies, consumed by light, destroyed by staying too long. Ellen sacrificed herself, saved the town, defeated death. Except death didn't lose. Death got exactly what it came for. Ellen, the one who was calling, the one who wanted it, the one who opened the window and offered herself and embraced it completely. The town is saved because death is satisfied, has fed, has taken what it wanted, has claimed the one who was willing. Death doesn't need to continue. Its appetite is sated, its purpose fulfilled. This isn't defeat. This is consummation. Ellen and Orlok, the living and death, the one who calls and the one who answers. The window opened, the invitation accepted, the embrace complete. Ellen is every person who sees death approaching and doesn't run, who understands what's coming and opens the window anyway, who knows it will consume them and offers themselves willingly, who surrenders to annihilation while calling it something else. Love, destiny, fate, sacrifice, nobility. Any word except what it actually is. Thanatos, the death drive, the part of us that seeks the end, that calls to what will destroy us, that opens windows knowing what will come through. Ellen isn't hero. She's truth. She's what we all do. She's the surrender we all make. She's the window we all open. She's the invitation we all extend to what we know will consume us. And we call it sacrifice, nobility, love, anything except what it is. Surrender to death, willing embrace of annihilation, the offering of ourselves to what we've been calling for all along. Now let's talk about the threshold, the barrier, the permission, the central rule of vampire mythology that reveals everything about what these creatures actually represent. A vampire cannot enter uninvited. This is fundamental. This is the rule that every vampire story includes. The monster stands at your door, your window, your threshold, and it cannot enter, not unless you say yes, not unless you give permission, not unless you invite it in. This seems like protection, like a defense built into the mythology. The vampire is powerful, yes, immortal, yes, dangerous, yes, but it needs your consent, needs your permission, needs you to open the door and say, "Come in." But this isn't protection. This is revelation. This is the mythology telling you something true about death, about destruction, about all the things that consume us. We invite them. We give permission. We open the door. We say yes. Come in. You're welcome here. Not obviously. Not consciously. Not with full understanding of what we're doing. But we do it. Every time. Every threshold death crosses. Every life destruction enters. We opened that door. We said yes. We invited it in. The threshold represents choice. Not the obvious choice, not, do I want death or not? But the thousand small choices, the compromises, the tiny permissions, the gradual openings that accumulate into an open door. One drink becomes habit, becomes dependency, becomes addiction. But at each step we said yes. We poured it. We consumed it. We invited poison into our bodies, telling ourselves it's just one drink, just one more. Just this time. Each permission granted, each threshold crossed. Each window opened a little wider. One fight becomes pattern, becomes toxic, relationship becomes the thing that's destroying you, but you can't leave. Each time you forgive, each time you stay, each time you make excuses, you're saying yes. You're granting permission. You're inviting it to remain, to continue, to consume you further. One scroll becomes hours, becomes compulsion, becomes the digital void eating your time and attention and presence. Each time you pick up the phone, each time you open the app, each time you tell yourself just 5 more minutes, you're inviting it in. You're granting access. You're opening the window to what will consume your evening, your focus, your life. The vampire doesn't force entry. We invite it. We say yes. We open the door, and then we act surprised when it enters, when it feeds, when it drains us, when it takes what we offered. But we offered it. We invited it. We said yes. Maybe not to the full extent. Maybe not understanding the complete cost. But we granted permission. We opened the threshold. We let it in. And once invited, it's hard to uninvite. The vampire that's entered. The addiction that's established. The relationship that's normalized. The habit that's formed. It's inside now. Past the threshold. given permission to remain. You can revoke the invitation, technically. In the mythology, you can tell the vampire to leave, remove its permission, close the door. But it's harder than opening it, always harder. The vampire doesn't want to leave. It's found its source, its sustenance, its willing host, and it will find ways to make you keep inviting it, to renew permission, to keep the window open, through craving, through habit, through the hole its absence would leave, through the discomfort of withdrawal, through the pain of change, through whatever means necessary to make you keep saying yes. The threshold isn't protection, it's revelation. It's the mythology telling you this is how death enters, this is how destruction arrives, this is how you get consumed, not by force, by invitation, by permission, by the 1,000 small yeses that add up to an open door. Orlok stands at Ellen's window. Cannot enter, needs permission, needs invitation, needs her to open the window and say yes. And she does. She opens it. She invites him in. She grants permission. And death enters and consumes her. And she surrenders willingly. Because she called him. Because she wanted this. Because at some level she's been opening this window all along. We are all Ellen. We are all standing at the window. We all have something on the other side that we're about to invite in. Something we know will consume us. Something that looks like desire but functions like death. And we're about to open the window, grant permission, cross the threshold, invite it in. While telling ourselves it's different this time, we're in control. We can handle it. It won't consume us like it consumed others, while death stands waiting, patient, knowing we'll open the window. Because we always do. Because the invitation is always extended. Because we always grant permission to what we know will destroy us. The threshold isn't protection. It's the last moment before surrender. The final instant before invitation. The brief second when we can still choose not to open the window. And then we open it. Now let's examine the modern invitations. The windows we're opening right now. The thresholds we're crossing. The permissions we're granting to things we know will consume us. Let's start with the most obvious. The one that looks least like death. The one we've normalized so completely we don't even see it as invitation anymore. Your phone, your screen, your digital companion. The thing you check 96 times per day. The thing you reach for before your eyes fully open. The thing that's with you in the bathroom, at meals, in bed, in every moment of potential silence or stillness. This is Orlok at the window. This is death seeking permission. This is the thing that wants to consume your time, your attention, your presence, your life. And you keep inviting it in. Every notification you don't turn off. Every app you allow to send alerts. Every social media platform you keep installed. Every time you tell yourself you'll just check quickly. You're opening the window. You're granting permission. You're inviting consumption. And it enters. And feeds. Hours disappear. Not stolen. Offered. You sat down with intention to do something else. You had plans. Goals. Things you wanted to accomplish. And instead you scrolled. You refreshed. You checked and rechecked and consumed content that you'll forget within minutes. The phone didn't force you. It stood at the window. Sent a notification. A little buzz. A little light. A little indication that something might be happening on the other side of the threshold. And you opened the window, picked it up, unlocked it, granted permission, and now it's 3 hours later. The thing you meant to do remains undone. The connection you meant to make wasn't made. The presence you meant to bring to your actual life was consumed by the digital void, drained by the vampire you invited, fed to the death you granted access. This is the mechanism. This is the threshold. The phone can't force you to pick it up, can't make you unlock it, can't compel you to scroll. It can only wait at the window, suggest its presence, imply that something worth your attention might be on the other side, and you open the window. Every time, multiple times per hour, nearly 100 times per day. Each opening a small invitation, each unlock a permission granted, each scroll a feeding, Each hour consumed a piece of your life drained. But it's not the phone. Not really. The phone is just the window, the threshold, the mechanism of invitation. What you're actually inviting is the void, the emptiness, the numbing, the distraction from presence, the escape from being fully here, the death of attention, of connection, of the capacity to be still with yourself. You know this. You've felt it. The hours lost, the presence drained, the connections missed because you were looking at a screen instead of the person in front of you. The life unlived because you were consuming someone else's life through a device. And you keep opening the window, keep granting permission, keep inviting it in, while telling yourself you'll stop, you'll be more disciplined, you'll use it less, you'll take control. While the vampire feeds, while death drains, while your life becomes the thing you experience through a screen instead of the thing you're actually living. Now let's talk about the other invitation. The one that wears love's face, the one that looks like connection, the one that promises to fill the void while actually being the void, the toxic relationship, the destructive bond. The thing you know is consuming you, but you can't leave. This is Orlok in human form. This is death that speaks your language, that knows your needs, that understands exactly what to say to get past the threshold, that has learned how to make you open the window again and again and again. The relationship starts like most relationships. Attraction, connection, promise, the sense that this person sees you, understands you, fills something that was empty. You open the door, you grant permission, you invite them into your life, and at first it feeds well, nourishes. The relationship gives back as much as it takes. There's reciprocity, balance. The threshold seems properly managed. The invitation seems properly bounded. But then the first violation, small, easily forgiven, easily explained away. They said something cruel. They crossed a boundary. They hurt you in a way that made you question, but they apologized. They explained. They promised it wouldn't happen again, and you believed them. You forgave. You kept the window open. That was the moment. That was when you granted permission for the consumption to begin. Not the initial invitation, but the forgiveness of the first violation, the acceptance of the first hurt, the belief that it wouldn't happen again when you knew at some level that it would, and it does, happen again, and again. Each time a little worse, each violation a little deeper, each hurt a little more severe. The relationship that promised to fill you begins to drain you, your energy, your peace, your sense of self, your connection to what you actually want and need. But you stay. You forgive again. You make excuses. You explain their behavior to friends who are concerned. You defend them to family who sees what you're refusing to see. You keep the window open. You keep granting permission. You keep inviting the consumption to continue. Because now you're invested. You've put time in, energy in, pieces of yourself in. Leaving would mean admitting you were wrong, admitting you granted permission to something destructive, admitting you invited this, that you could have closed the window and didn't, that you saw the vampire at the threshold and said yes anyway. So you stay, and it drains you further, takes more, demands more, consumes more. Your time, your attention, your emotional capacity, your ability to maintain other relationships, your connection to your own needs and desires, your sense of self. You become less, smaller, diminished, not because the relationship is overtly abusive, necessarily, but because it's consuming, taking more than it gives, draining more than it nourishes, functioning like death while wearing love's face. And you know this. You see it. Friends tell you. Family expresses concern. You yourself have thoughts late at night about leaving, about ending it, about closing the window and revoking permission, about refusing to invite the vampire in anymore. But then morning comes, or they apologize, or they have a good day, or you remember the beginning, Or you tell yourself it will get better. Or you're afraid of the emptiness their absence would leave. Or you can't imagine life without them even though life with them is consuming you. So you stay. You open the window again. You grant permission again. You invite them to continue consuming. Because the vampire at the threshold has learned your language, knows your fears, understands how to make you keep saying yes. This is how relationships become vampiric. Not through obvious violence, through the slow drain. The gradual consumption, the patient feeding on someone who keeps granting permission, who keeps opening the window, who keeps believing it will change while everything stays the same. You are Ellen, standing at the window, knowing what's on the other side, knowing it will consume you, and opening the window anyway. Because the alternative, being alone, seems worse than the slow death of staying. Because you've granted permission for so long that revoking it seems impossible. Because you're so drained already that you don't have the energy to leave. So you stay, and it feeds, and you diminish, and you tell yourself, this is love, this is commitment, this is working through difficulties, while the vampire drinks, while death drains, while you become less and less of yourself with each window you open. Now let's examine Thanatos, the death drive. The concept Freud identified that explains why we do this, why we invite what consumes us, why we grant permission to our own destruction. Thanatos is the counterpart to Eros, the death drive versus the life drive, the pull toward annihilation versus the push toward creation, the impulse toward dissolution versus the impulse toward connection. Freud observed that humans don't purely seek pleasure and avoid pain. We also seek destruction, not obviously, not consciously, but through patterns of behavior that lead toward our own diminishment, our own harm, our own end. We pick the relationships that hurt us, choose the substances that destroy us, create the patterns that drain us, maintain the habits that diminish us, and we do this repeatedly, consistently, as if drawn toward it, as if seeking it, as if at some level, we want the consumption. This isn't thoughts of ending one's life necessarily. It's subtler, deeper, more pervasive. It's the part of us that's tired, that wants to stop. That's exhausted by the effort of being alive and conscious and maintaining the self. That sees annihilation as relief. That views death as rest. And it expresses itself through small surrenders, small invitations, small windows open to things we know will consume us. We don't consciously think I want to stop existing. We think I want to drink. I want to scroll. I want to stay in this relationship. I want to avoid this difficult thing. I want to numb this feeling. But underneath what we're seeking is dissolution, relief from the burden of consciousness, escape from the effort of maintaining ourselves, permission to stop trying so hard, to let something else take over, to surrender control, to be consumed. The vampire at the window isn't alien to us, it's familiar. It's answering something we're calling for. It's responding to the part of us that wants to stop, that's tired of being so vigilantly alive, that sees the effort of existence and wants to rest, that views consumption as release. Ellen calls for Orlok before he arrives, stands at the window waiting for him, dreams of him, senses his approach. She's not victim. She's willing participant. She wants what he represents. The end. The dissolution. The release from having to be Ellen anymore. The surrender to something that will make all her decisions, that will consume her completely, that will end the exhausting work of being alive. This is Thanatos. This is the death drive. This is why we open windows we know we should keep closed. Why we invite vampires we know will drain us. Why we grant permission to consumption we know will diminish us. Because part of us wants it, seeks it, calls for it, views it as relief, as rest, as the end of having to try so hard to be ourselves. We don't want to stop existing exactly. We want to stop the exhausting work of living, and consumption feels like a middle ground, like a way to still be alive technically while not having to be so present, so conscious, so effortful, so vigilantly ourselves. The phone offers this. The relationship offers this. The substance offers this. The habit offers this. The pattern offers this. A way to surrender, to let something else control you, to be consumed by something external so you don't have to maintain yourself so carefully internally. This is why people return to destructive patterns, why those recovering face challenges, why people stay in toxic relationships, why we keep opening windows we've closed before. Not because we're weak, not because we're broken, but because part of us wants the consumption, seeks the surrender, views the vampire as relief from the exhausting work of being vigilantly alive. Orlok represents this. Death as seduction, death as promise of rest, death as the end of effort, death as relief from consciousness, death as surrender that looks like inevitability, death as the thing you're calling for while telling yourself you're resisting. Ellen doesn't defeat death by surrendering to it. She gives it what it wanted, what she wanted, what some part of all of us wants. The end. The dissolution, the release, the surrender, the permission to stop trying so hard to live. And the town is saved because death is satisfied, has fed, has taken what it came for, has claimed the one who was calling, can move on because its appetite is sated, its purpose fulfilled, but death isn't gone. It's just satisfied. For now, resting, digesting, preparing for the next time someone calls, the next window that opens, the next permission granted, the next invitation to enter, the next Ellen standing at the window waiting to surrender. Because there's always someone calling, there's always a window opening, there's always permission being granted, there's always Thanatos pulling someone toward consumption, there's always death at the threshold waiting patiently for invitation, and there's always someone who will open the window, who will grant permission, who will invite it in, who will surrender willingly, who will embrace what they know will consume them, while calling it something else: love, need, habit, weakness, anything except what it is. Thanatos, the death drive, the part that wants to stop, that seeks dissolution, that invites consumption, that opens the window knowing what will come through. We are all Ellen. We are all standing at the window. We all have our own Orlok, our own death, our own vampire, our own thing that will consume us if we let it. And part of us wants to let it, wants to open the window, wants to grant permission, wants to surrender, wants to stop having to be so vigilantly alive. That's the horror. Not that vampires exist, but that we invite them. Not that death comes, but that we open the window. Not that we're consumed, but that we grant permission. Not that Orlok ends Ellen, but that Ellen calls for Orlok, opens her window, offers herself willingly, embraces death, and calls it something else. Now let's talk about what we did to vampires, how we sanitized them, how we made death safe, how we turned the thing that represents annihilation into romantic fantasy, how we transformed Orlok into something we could desire without fear. Because Nosferatu showed us what vampires actually are, what they actually represent. And we couldn't handle it. We needed them to be something else, something safer, something less true, something we could fantasize about without confronting what the fantasy actually means. Hollywood took the vampire myth and made it beautiful, made it seductive, made it romantic, made it the bad boy with fangs, the immortal lover, the creature that wants you specifically, that chooses you, that makes you special through its attention. Dracula becomes Bela Lugosi, suave, sophisticated, foreign but charming, dangerous but attractive. Death wearing a tuxedo, annihilation with an accent. The vampire as aristocrat, as someone who could move through society, who could seduce properly, who could make consumption look like courtship. Then we went further. Interview with the vampire with feelings, with conscience, with internal conflict about what he is, death that regrets, annihilation that apologizes, the vampire as tragic figure, as someone to pity, to understand, to forgive for consuming people because he feels bad about it. Then Buffy, the vampire with a soul, the vampire who fights other vampires, the vampire as hero, as protector, as boyfriend, death reformed, annihilation redeemed, the vampire as someone who can be saved, who can change, who can love you without consuming you. Then Twilight, the vampire who doesn't even drink human blood, who sparkles in sunlight, who goes to high school, who falls in love with a teenage girl and waits for her. Death neutered, annihilation domesticated, the vampire as safe fantasy, as perfect boyfriend, as the thing that wants to consume you but restrains itself because it loves you. Each iteration makes the vampire safer, more acceptable, more desirable, takes the thing that represents death and makes it something you can fantasize about without confronting what you're actually fantasizing about. Because what you're fantasizing about is surrender, is consumption, is having something so desirable that you'll grant it permission to drain you, that you'll open the window for, that you'll offer your neck to, that you'll let consume you completely. But we can't admit that, can't acknowledge that the vampire fantasy is Thanatos fantasy. Is Death Drive dressed as romance? Is the desire for annihilation wearing the mask of eternal love? So we make the vampire safe, make it beautiful, make it conflicted, make it capable of love, make it something that won't actually consume you, that will restrain itself, that will make you immortal too instead of simply draining you. We take the thing that represents death and make it represent eternal life. We take the thing that stands for consumption and make it stand for preservation. We take the thing that means annihilation and make it mean transformation. We turn Orlok into Edward, death into boyfriend, the thing that will consume you into the thing that will protect you, the vampire that drains into the vampire that restrains. And in doing so, we lose the truth. We lose what the vampire myth was telling us. We lose the warning about invitation and threshold and permission and the death drive that makes us grant access to what will consume us. We make death safe, make annihilation desirable, make consumption look like love, make the vampire into something we can fantasize about without fear, without recognition, without understanding what we're actually calling for when we stand at the window. Nosferatu shows us what we've forgotten, what we've buried under a century of sanitization, what we've made safe because the truth was too uncomfortable, too revealing, too close to what we actually do. Orlok isn't beautiful, isn't romantic, isn't conflicted, isn't capable of love, is death, is plague, is the thing that consumes, that drains, that hollows out, that takes what you offer and gives nothing back except the relief of surrender. And Ellen doesn't get transformed into a mortal creature, doesn't become vampire herself, doesn't get eternal life as reward for her offering. She ends, consumed, drained, finished, dead. That's what death does. It doesn't transform you. It ends you. That's the truth we keep trying to escape. Keep trying to sanitize. Keep trying to make safe. Death isn't transformation. Death is termination. The vampire doesn't love you. The vampire consumes you. The window you open doesn't lead to eternal life. It leads to being drained. But we keep making vampires beautiful, keep giving them souls, keep making them capable of love and restraint, keep turning death into romance, keep sanitizing annihilation into fantasy, keep making consumption look like connection, because the alternative is too uncomfortable, too revealing, too close to admitting what we're actually doing when we open the window, when we grant permission, when we invite consumption, when we offer ourselves to what we know will drain us. We're not seeking eternal love. We're seeking eternal escape. We're not inviting transformation. We're inviting termination. We're not opening the window for the bad boy with fangs. We're opening the window for death, for annihilation, for the thing that will end our exhausting vigilance of staying alive. And we call it love, romance, desire, fantasy, anything except what it is. Thanatos. Death Drive. The part that wants to stop, that seeks the window, that grants permission, that invites consumption. Nosferatu won't let us forget, won't let us sanitize, won't let us make death safe. Shows us Orlok, shows us Ellen, shows us the window, shows us the invitation, shows us the surrender, shows us what vampire myths actually mean. And we hate it for that. Prefer the sanitized versions, the beautiful vampires, the ones with souls, the ones who sparkle, the ones who love us, the ones who won't actually consume us, because those vampires let us fantasize about surrender without confronting what we're surrendering to. Let us desire annihilation without admitting what we desire. Let us open the window without acknowledging what we're inviting in. Nosferatu doesn't allow that comfort, doesn't provide that safety, shows you death, shows you consumption, shows you the vampire as it actually is, as what it actually represents, as the thing you're actually inviting when you open the window. And Robert Eggers is bringing that back, returning to Murnau's vision, showing us Orlok again, reminding us what vampires actually are, what they actually mean, what we're actually doing when we fantasize about them, when we desire them, when we invite them. The film releases Christmas Day, counter-programming against family films and holiday cheer. Death arriving during celebration. Orlok appearing during the season of light, the reminder that the window is always there, the threshold is always present, the invitation is always one permission away, and we'll watch it. We'll see Orlok, we'll see Ellen, we'll see the window opened, we'll see the surrender, we'll see death consume, and then we'll leave the theater, pick up our phones, return to our toxic relationships, pour our drinks, open our windows, grant our permissions, invite our consumption. While telling ourselves it's different, we're in control. We won't surrender like Ellen. We won't be consumed like the town. While death stands at the window, patient, knowing, waiting for the invitation we'll extend, the permission we'll grant, the window we'll open, because we always do, because we always will, because part of us wants to, because Thanatos always calls, because death always seduces, because Orlok always finds his Ellen, and the window opens. And permission is granted, and death enters, and consumption begins, and we call it something else, anything else, everything else, except what it is. The invitation we extended, the permission we granted, the window we opened, the death we called for, the surrender we sought, the consumption we invited. We are all Ellen, standing at the window, about to open it, about to grant permission, about to surrender, while death waits, patient, knowing, inevitable, just outside the threshold, just beyond the window, just waiting for the invitation that we're about to extend. Subscribe to Umbral Fables as we continue to open the forbidden archives and explore the shadows of the myths that built us. This is Umbral Fables. We leave you now, not with comfort but with questions. Look closely. The dark journey continues.